I had the Harry Potter books
Okay.
and I would read like a chapter a night to get my daughter to sleep because it was for a while, it was, some kids fight sleep more than others, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And at one point, I had found this little monkey doll and I was it IKEA or no, Bed Bath and Beyond or one of those stores. And my daughter wouldn't let me leave without buying the little monkey. So I bought it for her. And after a while, she didn't want to hear Harry Potter. She wanted to hear the monkey stories. And so I started telling the stories. And it was a great stress reliever. Nursing school is not for the faint of heart. Nursing school is hard. And I was really stressed out. But those stories, they just made me feel better. It like relieved a lot of stress.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. We are getting off the Bruce train, though he will come up as he normally does. We are talking to writer and, as she said, a casual Springsteen fan. And we've already got way too political before I hit record. So you guys were spared that. Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Jesse. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, tell us a little about yourself.
So I'm a hybrid genre fluid author. I had a set of children's books published a couple years ago. Unfortunately, they're not in publication anymore. However, the character Turtle Monkey, she's trying to come back in another venue. So we're gonna see what's
Mhm.
happening with that. I also have some other works. I have a book about COVID coming out. It's fiction. It's the sequel to Gods of the Bay, which is basically women's fiction and
Okay.
magical realism. Every time I try to write horror, it turns into something else. And it's really sad. But there you go.
So I saw your statement, genre fluid.
Mhm.
Tell me what that means to you. I read it as one way, but I want to hear what you think that means.
Um, it means that I write in more than just children's books or a young adult or just for women. I'm not trying to be all things to all people, but I dabble in different genres. I'm actually writing a short story that's actually sci-fi, which was a place that I was afraid to tread because I'm like, this isn't me. And
Hmm.
then I was talking with award-winning author Jonathan Mayberry. Sometimes, like he has classes and stuff.
Yeah.
I met him on Zoom during the pandemic. He's a great guy, and his advice to me was to go out of your comfort zone. And I feel like I can't really be genre fluid unless I actually do go out of my comfort zone and write more things. And I find that I'm really enjoying that.
So I cannot believe I'm telling this story again. So listeners, if you don't want to hear the Tom story, skip ahead a couple of minutes. I've told this multiple times, but it keeps coming up. So Tom Zoller is a wonderful friend of mine. He is an artist. He's published his own comics. He's worked for other comic companies. He's probably best known for Love and Cage, which is a superhero situation comedy comic. And so I was at Houston and he had come down from Ohio for Free Comic Book Day. And Free Comic Book Day, for those who don't know, is when the industry publishers publish comics at a very cheap rate and comic stores can buy them at a discounted rate and then give them away. And the whole idea is to try to get a new generation of readers, right? So Tom's there and he's doing sketches and he's signing books if anyone wants to buy one of his books. And a lot of kids came up because it's Free Comic Book Day and their parents will go, he or she loves to draw. She wants to be an artist. Here, show him. And they're a little embarrassed, but Tom told them all the same thing. He said, I know you're going to take art classes, but I've got 3 pieces of advice. Take an accounting course, because you're going to have to figure out what to charge. What's your markup? If you're going to do a Kickstarter, are you going to have all your expenses covered? So you need to be able to handle your money. 2, take a speech class. You're going to have to do like I am right now. I'm talking to people. You're either going to have to present your work to someone, you're going to have to talk to them why they should hire you, or if they're coming to you, you need to be able to communicate your image and the vision. And 3, spend an hour a day drawing stuff you don't like to draw. Because he says, I will give you an example. It's easy to draw the stuff you love. But if you spend an hour a day drawing what you don't drive, for example, and this is Tom talking, I did not drawing horses. I now draw My Little Pony because that was the gig I got. And I've told that to multiple people in the creative business because it really makes a lot of sense, doesn't it, Joe?
Yes. I remember a podcast I did, and I don't want to say it's a panic attack, but I
Yeah,
had a meltdown and I was like, I can't do this. And it's weird because in my other life, I work in public health and I talk to people, and you have
yeah,
to talk to people and you have to be able to explain things to them
yeah.
on their level. And yeah, you have to keep doing things that you're not comfortable with to be successful.
I remember someone saying to someone, it was advice about someone wanting to be a quote unquote real writer. And this was years ago, before this, with the internet and self-publishing, and you can be an independent musician writer now. You don't have to go to the big publishers. But at the time, it was still more traditional. And they said, stop writing fan fiction. Fan fiction is fun. It's easy. You enjoy it. People are going to tell you they love it. And it is empty calories. If you're going to spend the time writing, write something unique, write something. And I thought about that because it would be easy. Let's talk about singer-songwriters, right? You could do a gig of all covers and you could pick the right covers that people will love, but if you aren't putting your own voice out there, if you aren't putting your own thoughts, that's the purpose of being creative, isn't it, Joe?
Yes. I had advice. I was met an editor through Jonathan, and their advice was write what scares you. And that doesn't mean write horror, but write what scares you. And for me, like writing sci-fi, that was scary. And I feel like if you're creative and you push the boundaries, I know that sounds really cliche, but it is 100% true. To grow as an artist, you have to you have to go where you fear. If you don't want to do a podcast, but you need to get your brand out there, you just have to push through it, and it gets easier. And I think when people do that, I feel like the challenge of it, when you've risen to the occasion, it actually feels good. There's some kind of payoff for it.
Yeah, I think so, Joe. I think that's a big feeling. All right, I want to go back. I always like to start at the beginning. So tell us about where you grew up. And we're going to do this in 2 phrases. The
Okay.
first part is, what kind of music was being played in the house? What kind of music were your parents listening to? What were you listening to as a youngster? And then I'll get to my second half.
Okay. There was a lot.
Okay.
It wasn't just one thing. My parents were first generation, so they had a lot of Italian music on that did not pay attention to as a kid because when you're a kid, you want to be cool. And there was a lot, there was some opera, some classical music. And then my brothers, where there's like a generation in between me and my brothers,
Mm-hmm.
they were like late end boomers and I'm Gen X. And so like a lot of the background music of my life when I was younger was like hard rock. Bruce was a big part of that, especially a lot of the music came just from the radio because if you had something was an 8-track tape and you only heard that in the car and when we had radios to bring over to the beach because I grew up on Long Island and went to Fire Island a lot with my brothers, you would hear Bruce on the radio. I think the one I remember the most was Born to Run.
Yeah.
A lot of that and then some of the later 80s ones. I'm trying to think, Hungry Heart. There was like another one. But no, Gloria Days I think is older. See,
Yeah.
I'm casual. You can tell right
No,
away
that's
that I'm
okay.
like, I don't
So,
remember when it came out.
no, are you the youngest?
Yes, I am.
A common theme here, Joe, is that siblings play a huge part in music. When my guests are telling the stories, often their parents do have part of it, but if you have siblings, they either influenced you or you sometimes rebel. If your older siblings were into classic rock, you may choose punk. That's funny. So the other half of the question, I always like to ask writers, was it a house of readers? Did people read in the house?
I was the biggest reader.
Okay.
I have a picture as a kid. I fell asleep reading a book at night, and there was like the book on my my face. Um, my dad would read the paper. My mom really liked music and gardening. And my brothers were like gearheads. So like they
Okay.
liked music, but they built things. They can hear a car down the street and tell you what's wrong with that because my dad had
Yeah.
a garage. So
Hmm.
they were more hands-on building things. So I was the reader.
Did Was that something always that you just loved? Is there anything specific that led to it, or you just always was someone?
When I began reading, I struggled. And I struggled for a couple years until third grade, where I think things just clicked. And I learned to read and learned that you had to read to learn going forward. You know what I mean? Because third grade
Yeah.
is a really big grade for kids.
Third and fourth grade is the first year, at least as a parent, that the teachers say, yeah, your kid's really cute and nice, but he's not cutting it. Up until that, it's, oh, he's so nice and he's a pleasure to be in your class. And I'm like, yeah, he's a good kid, but he ain't cutting it. What?
The first couple of years they're learning to read and then they
Yeah.
read to learn and that's usually when they catch. I used to work in the schools as a school
Okay.
nurse, so I know that's where we find when students maybe got by in the lower levels, the lower grades, that when you have to be able to read to learn, that's when they pick up a lot of the deficits, or if
Mhm.
somebody's like a preemie, they have a higher chance of having like maybe ADHD or some learning disabilities, and that's usually when they catch it.
Yeah. So as you're learning to read, and it sounds like you love to learn, did you know you wanted to be creative? Did you have stories in your mind, Joe?
I always liked to write.
Okay.
I think once I had a better grasp of language, of reading, that's when I wanted to write stories. And believe it or not, English, even through high school, was my favorite subject.
Okay. And when did you start making stories? When did you start writing?
I wrote a lot of stories. And I did a lot more poetry when I was in high
Okay.
school, but I wrote a lot of stories for English class. I stopped for a while, but what happened was I was in nursing school. I was a single mom with my daughter, and I had the Harry Potter books,
Okay.
and I would read like a chapter a night to get my daughter to sleep because it was for a while, it was, some kids fight sleep more than others, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And at one point, I had found this little monkey doll, and I was it IKEA or no, Bed Bath and Beyond or one of those stores, and my daughter wouldn't let me leave without buying the little monkey. So I bought it for her. And after a while, she didn't want to hear Harry Potter. She wanted to hear the monkey stories. And so I started telling the stories. And it was a great stress reliever. Nursing school is not for the faint of heart. Nursing school is hard. And I was really stressed out. But those stories, they just made me feel better. It like relieved a lot of stress. And so I started writing the stories, and eventually there was a local publisher. A friend of a friend said, submit it there. And we there was 4 books that actually published, but I've learned a lot from that venture.
Mm-hmm.
People liked it, but they either wanted chapter books or picture books, like not the easy readers, the ones that, the books that bridge in between to help kiddos read. But that is one of my favorite characters because she's still alive and vibrant in my mind. And always, if I'm having a stressful day, I can go back and write a story.
Do did you do the voices when you were telling the stories to your daughter?
There's only one. I haven't developed the voices
Okay.
uh further, like hooray. That's like the monkey, like yeah,
Okay.
monkey.
Yeah.
And I have special needs animals, and sometimes I talk to them in that voice because one is cognitively challenged, the other one's blind, and
Mm-hmm.
they like that high pitch because they're
Sure.
cats. And yeah, so I still sometimes do the voices, but I haven't really developed them
Mm-hmm.
as much maybe as I should have. I don't know.
No, no, I just was curious. Some people have a knack for voices and some people don't. Like I don't. I have a couple of things that just family wise will do. Not someone who has that mimic or something. I can't even do a good accent. Um, so you did you finish nursing school?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've been a nurse, and I've been a nurse for a long time. I was an LPN for a long time, and then I went back to do my RN,
Hmm.
and that was difficult. All total, I would say I've been in nursing for 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'll ask a dumb question. How did you get through COVID and all that stress?
I was with the kids. And
Yeah.
actually I went back. It was wild. Okay. I worked 3 days a week in the school. So one school a day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I ended up being like the team lead on the weekend, the nurse for the COVID hotline
Okay.
for our county. We would report cases to the health department,
Yeah.
and I would tell parents and families and principals, okay, this is the guidelines now. It felt every week the guidelines were changing. It was insane. I practiced cautiously, and people, I guess in Denver, people were very open to that.
Yeah.
I have to give my families and my coworkers a lot of credit for doing the right thing. It's helpful when you're not fighting it, and it did take a toll on the students, but we could have lost a lot more people here. I feel like I don't remember the exact numbers. I'd have to look it up. We did have a hefty death toll, but it feels like it was a lot less than most other places.
Yeah. Are you still in schools? Are you still
Yes.
working at school? That's good. You just
Yeah.
for those of you who aren't seeing this on video, Joe's face just lit up like 100 watts. You must love the kids.
Yes. I was I left for a year, but I think it was just stress from COVID.
Sure.
And we had a management change that wasn't great, but then again, the management changed again, so I came back. And yeah, I've done womb to tomb nursing, but I like the
Hmm.
kids. That's the one, I guess, specialty in nursing where it's about life and not people always being sick or
Yeah,
people dying or always having an emergency. Don't get me wrong. I've called the ambulances plenty of times, but
sure.
it's usually always a really good outcome.
That's good. That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love seeing that joy in your face. That's great. You had done your children's book series, and tell me the hero again.
Turtle monkey?
Turtle Monkey. I love that. And they're no longer in print, but you are that's on the list of things you want to do, I take it?
Yes, right now I was trying to do a Kindle Vella project with it
Okay.
because I've done my own version of art. I don't draw great, but it's felt
Hmm.
and foam art. So it's mixed
Yeah.
media, and I've actually had feedback where it's really cute.
Hmm.
I have a little sample book up on Amazon. Um, and it's also translated in Spanish because I have an associate's in Spanish. I had to learn to speak Spanish at least at an intermediate level because a lot of my students are newcomers.
Okay.
And to understand what they needed, what was hurting, I had to know. I had to learn Spanish. So this is helping me improve my skill and also more people can read Turtle Monkey if they like, because Spanish and English, there's a lot of people that speak those languages, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of bilingual folks in my community as well.
Okay. I'm going to say this, and I'm going to try not to, I'm trying to be funny, not condescending.
Uh-huh.
You can shut me up, but you decided to do a grown-up book. Tell me about that.
That grown up book was like a love letter to my hometown.
Okay. Tell me about that.
It's hard for me to put into words. I was trying to write because I don't know, I love the ocean, but I have a healthy respect for it. And there's always that fear. And I think it's universal of what's under the water that you can't see,
Right.
right? And I tried to approach it that way, but it turned into something more where the background, the setting of Fire Island and Long Island actually became a part, like a character, because I've gone back. I left in 98 and I traveled around and I finally settled in Colorado in 2007. And it was just really strange because you go home and they tell you you can't go home again. It just feels the land changed and everything was drastic. I remember having honeysuckle, there were blackberry bushes, like there was nature everywhere. And then when I went back a few years ago and it's all gone.
Mm.
Everything is lawns. Everything I remembered as a kid, like all the magic, like the nature is gone. And I wove in a little bit of my, how do we say it? My concern for the environment
Okay.
because it's just not the same. Even Davis Park has changed.
So what was this first book that was a tribute to your hometown? Bringing it back to
Gods of,
Bruce. Yeah.
oh,
Yeah. Gods of Bay?
Um,
Gods of the Bay? That was the
Gods of the
first one?
Bay. That was the
Nice.
first one.
Yeah.
And I had actually some of Bruce's songs playing when I was editing it. Um, I have a hard time writing when I'm listening to stuff with lyrics, and I think it's just because I'm like squirrel, and you can
No.
probably tell in this podcast, and I apologize for that. But I did a lot Glory Days, Hungry Heart, Dancing in the Dark, and that's a good one. And it's anytime that song is on, I always listen to it. It was my mom was not like a rock and roll kind of person. Like maybe she liked
Okay.
Elvis. That was it.
Okay.
That song came on, like she loved that song. And we used to tease her because she used to call it This Gun's for Hire instead of like
Mm-hmm.
this.
That's funny.
And so every time it's on there, like in my mind, it's like This Gun's for Hire because we used to tease her all the time and she would never remember the real name of the song. And that kind of helped bring back some of the memories of
That's
like when
awesome.
I was writing about, yeah, when I was writing about the past and Long Island and
Yeah.
Fire Island and Sunken Forest and stuff like that.
Yeah. You mentioned that sometimes that creativity and music goes together. Now, I am similar to you. There are sometimes I can listen to music or a podcast while I'm working and other times I can't. If I'm working on I remember once I had to do a bunch of performance appraisals, right? And so I just had music on in the background just to keep everything out. And it was just almost passionate passively listening to it at background noise. But often, and I've had other writers share that some of them love it. They just that gets them in the mood, and others say no, it's got to be instrumentals. It's got to be something without lyrics to be the tone of the music can help feel the creativity, but if you have lyrics, it can distract you. That story.
Yes.
Is that similar what you're saying?
100%, which is why I only listen to instrumental when I'm writing because I squirrel
Yeah.
and I feel like I just can't get a lot done. But thank I'm so thankful for YouTube because it has a a, a great assortment of instrumental stuff. And I'm not talking elevator music like maybe
Yeah.
younger people might think. There's some dark instrumental music out there. I was listening to one when I'm almost finished with that story anyway, like the sci-fi story I was talking about to you
Yeah.
about in the beginning of the podcast. It helps draw out some of those darker thoughts, maybe, or things that are more
Hmm.
appropriate to the story. It helps me focus.
Do you like Do you find short stories or novels? Which do you find more satisfying, or it just truly depends on the story you're trying to tell?
I think it depends 100% on the story
Hmm.
because I really loved Gods of the Bay, but it was challenging. That was the first book that was the first novel length work I had completed on my own.
Yeah,
But Turtle Monkey, anything with that, especially like if I'm in a very stressed out place,
yeah,
that helps bring me out of a funk. Or I can at least do some of the art because it's fun and it's positive. There's not negative feelings. Like, yes, like she always gets into trouble. As a kid in third grade, I was out in the hall with my desk a lot because I talked a lot. So
okay.
that was my teacher's classroom management. Like they would get in so much trouble nowadays to do that. Guess who's out in the hall? Turtle Monkey. And it makes me laugh because I'm like, oh yeah, I remember the teacher got mad at me for talking, so I'm out in the hall. Uh,
Do You talked about trying to do something that's hard. What what have you not done that you want to? What else is on that creative list that you might want to itch?
I think I want to do a sci-fi book, like a novel length work versus
Okay.
a short story. But I think short stories, for me anyway, if I successfully complete a story, then I feel that I can do a better
Okay.
work. I also want to try to expand into having my work in magazines like Asimov's or Clark's World,
Yeah.
and these are things that I enjoy those. I enjoy those magazines.
So one of the things you seem to be pretty proud of is you're very active with fellow writers. The Colorado Authors League, I saw on your website. Talk to me about what why you like being in that community.
I it feels like Colorado, and maybe this is just because I've lived here for so long. You can toss a stone and there's another writer. Like I have another writer. He passed away. He lived next door, and then down the street there's another writer. And I feel like in Colorado, a lot of the writers in general are very supportive of each other. It's not a competition.
Yeah.
And it's nice to get feedback. That's not to say that there's not some negative people there, but for the most part, it's a very supportive community.
Mm.
And we're always trying to, if I hear of something, events, and they want authors, I spread the word and people reciprocate.
Mhm.
And it's nice to have a few friends and say, hey, take a look at this. What do you think? I'm struggling. And getting some genuine feedback.
Mhm. You talked about your first novel. Talked to me about some of your later material. What sell yourself a little bit there, Joe. Talk a little bit about it. Give me your elevator pitch about the latest books.
I always struggle with elevator pitches.
I get you.
And I think for me too, like women are taught, don't say that. You're bragging and people are going to get annoyed
Yeah.
with you. I had honorable mention, like I would with Gaza the Bay, I was at least a finalist in the Colorado Authors League
Okay.
awards, and that's a big deal
Sure.
because that's from other authors. It's
Yeah.
and that's my
Yeah.
first work. I'm trying to hopefully have the magic from that book transition into the second book, how that character and the family deals with
Mhm.
COVID in Colorado. And I know maybe some people are like, I'm sick of COVID, but I feel like it's really important because it's one of the things I feel like public health. I don't think people, I don't think a lot of people think about public health on the everyday.
Sure.
And COVID made that a bigger deal. I just don't want to see like public health, I guess, shunted to the background again
Mhm.
because it's important to keep our communities healthy.
And we weren't going to get political, and I promise I won't stay too much, but there was a war, and that's my words, not yours, against science
Yeah.
and against following advice. I don't understand that people, and I'm generalizing. And so if you guys don't want to hear Jesse rant, kick ahead 5 minutes. But there will be people that would believe a random stranger on the internet instead of their family doctor, right? It's in the idea that it became political. And I've had a friend on the podcast that said, poor Bella, I love her. She goes, I didn't think I would live to see two presidents screw up a pandemic. talking about Reagan and AIDS and
Yeah.
he that should not be named and COVID, right? And it should not have been political. It just shouldn't have been. It's okay, this is what we need to do. Let's do for it, go. And they're still, I am amazed when I see someone wearing a mask. Doesn't bother me. That's fine. But you'll see people, why? You don't have to wear one anymore. If they want to wear a mask, let them wear a mask. What do we care?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't understand it, but I was doing a little research. I still
Yeah.
have to do more.
Yeah.
They had some of that in the 1918 flu,
Yeah.
but I feel like it was amplified
Yeah.
for
With
COVID.
yeah, and social
Like,
media, right? It's
yeah.
there. Yeah. The latest book, Rise of the Green Temple,
Uh-huh.
it is of the genre fluid. Where would you put this one?
Okay, so that one, it's actually the third.
Okay.
I decided to have some fun
Okay.
and write a fantasy story about a druid. It's like bisexual Indiana Jones if he was a
Okay.
druid.
Okay.
So the main character relies on his luck a lot and really doesn't think. And he's young, so he's impulsive. That's like on brand for that age. And it they're fighting a monster, or they're fighting something that wants to control everything, and he doesn't really know what he's doing. He makes a lot of mistakes because I feel like a, a lot of the books I've read in this genre, it's like they only make one or two mistakes in the book, and I'm like, that's not
Yeah.
real life. That's not
Yeah.
real life. And they're young.
Yeah.
You have your older mentor, but you're still trying to figure things out. It's not going to be perfect. You're going to have to backtrack several times. And I tried to make that like a realistic journey for someone that's like young adult and
Yeah.
learning through some very painful events.
So what are the three books of the trilogy?
So the first one's Brotherhood of Blood, City of the Dreaded God, and Rise of the Green Temple.
Okay. And similar cast, characters, same hero?
Yes, same hero, same characters. The hero loses at least a couple of very important people to him.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did was it did you like having a bigger playground to play in?
This character in particular, Jericho, is the main character, and I had to rein him in a bit. It's nice, but yeah, there are, I think when you're writing and then you're editing and revising, this character wanted to go into places that I wasn't sure maybe he should go into
Yeah,
for a young adult kind of book, if that makes sense.
sure. And I love when writers talk about that. I've told this story multiple times, but I was at a book signing here in Dallas with Lawrence Block years ago, and he was promoting one of the Matthew Scudder mystery novels, and he took questions, and I asked him, and I can't remember which book now, but there is a book where the main character is has a secret from the female lead, Elaine, and he's actually having an affair. And at the end of the book, she says, I love you, Matthew, and I love you completely. And you're giving me everything I could possibly want, and I don't need anything from you. And so I asked Lawrence, I said, Mr. Block, to me, that means Elaine knows he's having an affair, but she doesn't care. And he goes, I think so too. Or it could be she just, because she knows men, thinks there could be something else. She goes, so I don't know yet what Elaine knows. And I love that the character had their own voice with him, right? Not, I haven't decided yet, and I left it open so that I could have fun with the writing. It's truly the character hasn't told me yet, and there's a beauty to that, I think.
Yes, sometimes I'll be writing. This happens a lot more with Turtle Monkey because I started writing her in 2012.
Okay.
And I'll be honest, some of the things she does, I do take from real life.
Sure, of course.
I have a very interesting child and I
Okay.
love her to death. But yeah. And also at work, kids just, I don't
Sure.
know. I think
Yeah.
by osmosis, I take some of that creativity
Yeah.
and Turtle Monkey does something. And I'm like, oh my God, that's great. And I would never think in my adult mind that it would come out. And maybe it's just that they're talking to my inner child.
Yeah.
But yeah, the characters, I like to say they quicken. Like when I feel connected, Turtle Monkey is the one that I connect with the most. And all of a sudden, I'll have a story, like I'll see a phrase or I'll write down something of thought, and then somebody says maybe something like, for example, I had a friend that's like, oh, I'm afraid of grasshoppers. And I went to visit my parents' grave and I had the windows up in my car and they started jumping in. And I was like, that's why Turtle Monkey went to the beach because she's afraid of them and they're not at the beach and she wouldn't leave her house. And a whole story came out of somebody just telling me, like, I'm afraid of grasshoppers. And they got in my car.
The Stephen King makes the joke, "Where do you get your ideas?" And he goes, "Like, keep them from a box underneath the bed or something." And I think Neil Gaiman is the one that said, "They're just everywhere. Just they're out there, and it's hard to turn it off." And I think really creative people have that, where it drives them and you get those ideas. It's having the discipline to sit down and do the work to tell the story.
And I always say, oh, when I wake up and I have a good idea and I'm going to write it down, but half the time I wake up at 5 in the morning, I have to use the restroom, and it's on a weekend. When I get
Yeah.
up early enough as it is during the week, and I'm like, I'll just write this down and wake up, I'll remember it, and it's totally gone. And that's one of the biggest frustrations in my life is that I
Yeah.
don't stay up to write it. Like with Turtle Monkey, there's so many
Hmm.
that isn't too difficult, but if it's like a short story and I'm like, oh, I'll remember it, I never do. And I learned that maybe I could just take a nap or go to bed earlier because I feel like I've missed out on quite a few stories, except for the one sci-fi story. I actually, I write a little outline
Okay.
so I know where I go with it. And I was able to stay up, write the outline, and I actually was able to go back to sleep. That was such a win.
That is a win. That sounds like a great win. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. Joe, what have I not asked you that I should have?
How to find me?
Yes, that's absolutely. Yes. I'm going to have you answer the Mary question, then I'm going to let you promote away.
Okay.
Any other questions about stories or any stories you want to share that I forgot to ask you?
Nah, they'll probably happen after
All right,
we
that sounds
end.
good. You're always welcome back. All
Okay,
right.
great.
Yeah. All right. Joe, before I ask you the Mary question, if someone wants to hear more about you, where can they go?
You can go to joefontana.com. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I don't really go on, I think Twitter's dying, so
Yeah.
probably not there. So if they start charging, you won't see me post anything ever again on there.
Yeah, I'm right
Yeah.
there with you. Twitter is where I do most of my social media right now to promote the podcast and such. Like I just tweeted that you and I were talking, but yeah, it's not enough. Of course, I do have a fear, and we go political again. Somebody said, yeah, but if all us blueberries leave, it'll be nothing but a big raspberry patch. But I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
open to it. All right, Joe, this has been so much fun. I've had a blast. But before I get you out of here, I end every podcast with the Mary question. If you are a fan of Joe's work and you're checking out this podcast, thank you for listening. She made you all proud. Jay Armstrong is a retired honors English teacher from the Philadelphia area. When he was teaching, he would give his students the lyrics to Thunder Road. They would treat it as if it was a poem, going over the word choices, the imagery, the themes that Bruce's explores on the song. And then he would ask his class at the end of the day, does Mary get in the car? Joe, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
I looked at that several times. And it reminds me of a Stephen King story
Okay.
called The Mist,
Okay.
not the movie version, which I despise the ending just because there's a lot of things at the ending I didn't like.
Okay.
But in the original book, there was ambiguity.
Yes.
They go out into the mist and then the story ends. It feels like that with this because he doesn't come right out and say that she gets in the car. He's trying to coax her into the car. And then
Yes.
there's that line where they're talking about her dress is in rags on the street. And I'm like, is she dead?
Ah, okay.
Is she dead? Is he dead? And is he trying to have her cross over?
Ah, okay.
That was my thought. So I think maybe she was getting close to going into the car, but I don't think she got in yet. I think he would have to pay her a couple of more visits.
All right. I like that little spooky twist. That's a great answer. I love that answer. There we are. Joe, this was so much fun. Thank you. I just hope you had a blast.
I did. I was like, oh my God, what are we going to talk about for an hour? Because I'm really bad about talking about myself. And that this was great. I'd love to come back at a
Perfect.
later date. This was awesome.
You mentioned at the beginning that doing something you're uncomfortable with and it sometimes turns out good. I would love to have you on. The next time you've got a book to promote, just reach out and say, hey, Jesse, let's visit again. Or if you think of something you want to talk about, just you see a movie you like or you heard some music you like, let me know and we'll do this again, okay?
Yeah, great. Thanks.
All right. Listeners, thank you for listening to us. I hope you go to our website, check out some of the books. I'm going to work on a pitch for her. I think a bisexual Indiana Jones who's a druid is that alone. I'm sold. Let's get more of this. So yeah, let's go check out the books. But for now, we're going to end with if we open up our hearts, love won't forsake us. Just let the music take us and carry us home. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, listeners. We'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.